to introduce our first speaker, Naseem Naqvi. So Naseem so he's the president and co-founder of the British Blockchain Association, and he's also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the British Blockchain Association.
Connor, thank you very much for inviting me and for a very kind introduction. I have known Connor for a few years now. I think we first met in London a few years back. Connor has been doing some great work in the enterprise blockchain space. So thank you for having me. As Connor has already introduced me, I'm the president of the British Blockchain Association and also the chair of the Center for Evidence-Based Blockchain. One of my other roles is that I'm also the chair of research and education, special interest group at Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. The title of my talk today is Enterprise Blockchain Research from Inception to Impact, Getting It Right First Time. This talk is a part of the workshop series called Blockchain for Enterprises that we deliver to our members at the Center for Evidence-Based Blockchain. But because I have only 20 to 25 minutes or so, I will try to cover some of the key concepts in my talk today. So I would like to start by telling you a story of a young, extremely smart entrepreneur called Elizabeth Holmes, who invented Theranos, which was the world's first blood testing kit that could diagnose more than 25 diseases from a single drop of blood. Her invention was so revolutionary and groundbreaking that at one point she was given the title of the next Steve Jobs. She raised $700 million for her startup, and her company was valued at $9 billion, making her one of the youngest millionaires at the time. Her company, her enterprise, had the backing of the presidents of the United States and support of some of the most influential politicians globally, including US Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and many, many others. Theranos was set to be the next Apple until one day, a professor at Stanford University raised some concerns, citing lack of peer-reviewed evidence and research data to support the claims made by Theranos. And he found lack of documented evidence at all stages of a startup company, from basic science all the way up to distribution. So this is how a startup journey looks like. You start with a basic science, what exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then you build evidence base as you go along. So you conduct a small pilot in ideal settings, then you introduce your product to the real world, then you expand a bit more and deliver it to a wider public, whatever your product or solution is. So he noticed that there was a complete lack of evidence base for all the claims that were made by the company. And as Neil deGrasse Tyson says at the start of every disaster movie, there is a scientist being ignored. And that's what happened. So a year later, the company was valued at $0 after a series of investigations and also an SEC inquiry, which concluded that Theranos was a fraud all along. And it was declared one of the biggest corporate scams of Silicon Valley. There is also a Netflix movie called The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. It's a very nice story of a real life documentary of what exactly happened at Theranos. In the aftermath of Theranos saga, there were calls for independent peer review of tech startups to help prevent such scandals. And there is also an article written in Forbes saying that the startups still aren't publishing enough peer-reviewed research. So if you are a blockchain startup or a company, and if you are serious about your work, be prepared that at some stage you will be asked two questions. What is the evidence of the work that you are doing? And what has been the impact, or what will be the impact of your work? Now, whether you are applying for a government grant or a government funding or a university grant or Horizon 2020 or whatever it is, or commissioning from public services, or indeed a review by the regulators or policymakers, you will be asked these two most important questions. What is the evidence of your work, and what will be the impact? And I'm going to cover these today in my talk. So enterprise blockchain projects, 5 major challenges. The first one is defining the problem. You can use these as a kind of a blueprint, whether you are writing your research paper or your pilot project. These are kind of a blueprint, a roadmap. These 5 important questions. So 5 challenges. What is the problem that you are trying to solve? Acquiring high quality evidence. So you have to make sure that the work you are doing, both in terms of defining the problem and your solution, is based on evidence. Then you evaluate the evidence, critically appraise the evidence, apply the evidence, and then assess and report outcomes. And this, in essence, is what evidence-based blockchain is. Ask, acquire, appraise, apply, assess. 5 A's. Policymakers and regulators are increasingly using evidence-based blockchain to emphasize the importance of this concept. This is a report from European Commission from last year, saying that decision makers, it is relevant now for decision makers to have an evidence-based perspective on which benefits DLT can generate. And what is evidence-based blockchain? It is what we have just discussed. So what we did is we conducted a study looking at the state of play in the blockchain space. We evaluated over 500 blockchain and crypto companies to see if their projects could be defined as evidence-based practice. So over 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, we measured companies using the framework of evidence-based practice, which is problem, comparison, intervention, and outcomes. And the study concluded that almost half of all blockchain companies showed no explicit evidence of the problem to be solved. 1/3 of the companies failed to cite a comparison and intervention analysis, and less than 2% reported their findings in a peer-reviewed fashion in scientific journals. So we looked across 8 different disciplines, including digital identity, climate, governance, law, cybersecurity, etc. And essentially 4 questions we looked at. So what is the problem? Is there a clear description of a problem to be solved? And what is the evidence for that? How big is the problem? Who is affected? Who is talking about it? The next question is, what are the existing solutions? So a comparison intervention analysis. Is there anyone else out there who is solving the problem better than you? If so, then what is different and what is unique about your approach to the problem? And then what is your intervention? And is your intervention based on any scientific evidence? And then have you actually reported the outcomes? What are the results? Now, when it comes to evidence, not all evidence is equal. Some evidence is good quality and some evidence is not so good quality. So I think it's important to understand this. This is a chart showing filtered and unfiltered evidence. So we further subdivided those 4 questions into filtered evidence, unfiltered evidence, and no evidence at all. So for all 4 questions, we had 3 questions for each. Is there evidence of a problem to be solved? So is there filtered evidence, which means peer-reviewed research, a critically appraised article, a national guideline, an evidence thesis, and so on? Is there, if there is no filtered evidence, has the company cited any unfiltered evidence, which means non-peer-reviewed information, such as case studies, articles, opinion articles, and so on, and or is there no evidence at all? So it's very important to understand that not all evidence is equal. There are grades and levels of evidence. This is an infographic of the research. It's in public domain. You can read this paper by visiting the JBBA. So I said that I will give you some key action steps on how to actually write your research paper, whether it's a grant proposal, grant application, a research paper, or a conference paper, a conference abstract, whatever it is. You have to follow these important key action steps. So how to get it right first time? The first thing is formulate a precise question. Now, what does that mean? That means is, if you can't say I have best solution or using blockchain for supply chain, that is a very, very vague question. You have to be very specific. Which component of the supply chain you are planning to improve? Secondly, what type of blockchain are you planning to use? Thirdly, where exactly are you planning to use it? So there are many, many different components in this question that you have to define very precisely. So you have to be very specific and precise about the problem, question, what exactly is it that you are trying to solve. The second is, how have you acquired the evidence, both for the problem and for the solution? So have you searched for high quality evidence? So government policymakers, decision makers are going to be asking these questions. If you have not asked these questions yourself, if your company or enterprise has not looked into it, and if you are serious about your work, be prepared, because somebody down the line is going to ask you these questions. What is the evidence of the work that you are doing? Then you have to critically appraise the evidence. Is it good quality? Is it poor quality? Why are you using it? And so on. And then you have to apply the results to your practice, your problem, and then monitor and evaluate the changes. And it's very important that you write that down, you publish your findings. Now, when it comes to evidence, there was some evidence in case of Theranos, for example, from the organization itself. However, there was no evidence from professional expertise. There was no stakeholder or consortium approvals, and definitely there was no scientific evidence behind the claims. So if you are making any claims that your enterprise, your company is one of the best blockchain companies out there, you have to be a little bit more specific than that in terms of evidence. And I would recommend that you look across the sources of evidence from your organization, from scientific evidence, from your consortium, and also professional expertise. So the first question is ask, what is the problem? Define the extent, magnitude, any solutions proposed to date, who is talking about it, and what is your solution? Why is it different? And you have to demonstrate scientific evidence to support your claim. This approach is being adopted, evidence-based practice, by various governments across the globe. This slide is from UK government's FinTech review, Khalifa's review, which was published recently. It's a very, very large document, but this is a slide asking companies. So the first question they asked companies is, what problem is your company solving? Okay, so as I said, this will be the first question you will get asked. And it is better to have an evidence-based, scientific, peer-reviewed answer to this question now before you get asked this question down the line. So the more structured, the more specific, the more precise it is, the better it is. So what exactly is the problem you're solving? Now, where would you search for evidence? So as I explained before, there are two types of evidence: good quality evidence and not so good quality evidence. So if you want to search for high quality evidence, scientific evidence, then the source you should be looking at is peer-reviewed journals. So what happens in peer-reviewed journals is that your work is reviewed by experts in the field. Depending on the journal, it's most likely going to be a double-blind review, which means that the authors don't know the identity of the reviewers, and the reviewers don't know the identity of the authors. So your work is assessed purely on the basis of merit. This is very different from publishing your article in a magazine or a blog post, because these are not reviewed. So in a scientific academic journal, your work is reviewed by experts in the field. And the outcome of that review is always a win-win for you as an enterprise anyways, because there are only two outcomes. Either your work, your pilot project, your experiment gets accepted by the journal, which means there is a seal of approval that this is a credible piece of work. It is authentic. It does what it says on the tin. It is authentic. It has undergone scientific rigor. Or the other possibility is that it may get rejected, and there is often accompanied comments on why your work is not approved after a review, in which case you can improve your work, take the suggestions on board, and then resubmit for another review. So your work always improves and always get better, in my opinion, after a review. Scientific journals are not always about academic work. There is a lot of industry work that has been published in scientific journals. This is one example, and there are hundreds of many other examples as well. This work is from Consensus, or using Ethereum registration authorities for private side chains, was published in the JBBA. Okay, this is industry work. This is field work. This is another research example on blockchain standards. Another research from Pegasus, which is Consensus, and was published in academic journal, underwent peer review, and then published as an academic paper. So there is a lot of industry field research that is now being published in academic journal, and I think this is a very, very encouraging trend. This is another paper from Cardiff University, and also from Companies House, which is the largest UK government organization for registration and record of limited companies in the United Kingdom. Another field research on blockchain for public services, published in the JBBA. Another research on enterprise blockchain. So there are many, many examples. The next step is you appraise the evidence. Now, what does appraisal means? The appraisal means a review of the evidence. Now, you could do this yourself, or you could, one option is to rely on the review at the journal. So if you don't know how to conduct a critical review, you could look at a peer-reviewed research paper, because that paper has been reviewed by at least 2 or 3 independent reviewers who are experts in the field. The next step is you apply the evidence. So this is an example of another industry research, another enterprise research, industrial symbiosis networks, using the power of blockchain-based marketplaces. So this author collected all the data of what industrial symbiosis networks are, how blockchain can be used to power these networks, and how industries and governments and policymakers can benefit from these networks. So he put together, collected all the findings, all the data, all the evidence, conducted a small experiment, and then published his findings in a peer-reviewed journal. So this is another industry research. The last step is you publish your findings, you assess your results, and then you publish your results. So the first step is please write down your findings. Don't just say. It's important to write down each and everything. Then you present your paper either at a conference, at a scientific conference, where it is reviewed again. You put your paper for a peer review at a scientific journal, and you publish your findings, ideally open access, so that more people can benefit from it. So the journey looks like this. So you have some inputs, then you conducted your experiment. Now you have some results. Now those results are not the outcomes. Those results are your outputs, which means just the findings of your research. If your findings are useful and they are of significance and relevance to your industry, hopefully they will be picked up by the policymakers, regulators, companies, governments, enterprises, public services. And once they are integrated into policy documents, into recommendations, national guidelines, then they become outcomes. Okay, so they are the outcomes of your research now. That you did a research, you conducted a project, and now they are part of the national guideline. They are now the outcomes. Not yet made an impact in terms of a tangible impact, the end result in terms of improvement in economy or improvement in the health of economy or society and so on. And once that happens, then you have achieved impact. So impact is a very, very broad term. And there are many, many definitions of what impact means, but I would simply like to call it benefit to the society. So has your project or experiment resulted in benefit to the society, to the end user? So you have to really keep track of it. And I'll share with you some examples later on in my slide. So this is an example from MRC, a slide, various ways you can achieve impact. Publications, collaborations with the stakeholders, your research material, communicating your findings, collecting the evidence, integrating your findings in national policies, and so on. Many definitions of impact. This is from UK Research and Innovation, saying impact is the demonstrable contribution that excellent research makes to society and the economy. So if your project has made contribution, an excellent contribution to the society, you have actually achieved impact. It's also important to understand that for universities and for institutions to receive grants, Research Excellence Framework 2021, you have to have achieved some impact, and that's 25% of the funding that universities and institutions are going to receive is based on impact. So that is one of the funding that your institution is going to get. So if your research has made an impact, then you have a much better chance of securing future funding as well. So it's important to understand. In 2017 and 2018, US government evaluated 10 programs, 10 community programs, and they found out that 9 out of the 10 programs were not based on any scientific evidence, which means high quality evidence, peer-reviewed evidence. 9 out of 10 programs, and each program was causing the US economy $9 to $10 billion. So US government looked into it, and then they signed law making evidence-based policy making a law in the United States. So evidence-based decision-making, evidence-based implementation of projects is now a law in the United States. You can read more about it on the Congress website. So key summary and action steps for enterprises and researchers. Think evidence and think impact very early. From basic science to distribution, your pilot project and also your implementation in real world and also beyond. So think of collecting evidence and impact throughout this pathway. Think of all the routes to impact. So as I explained before in the slide, think of economic impact, think of social impact, think of societal impact, and technological impact, and there are many, many more. So impact is a very, very broad term. But as long as you are making some impact, you have some evidence for it, you are on the right track. I would like to say that just a white paper is not enough, because a white paper is often just a business document. does not cut the mustard always. So you have to make sure that you have a proper research paper. If you are serious about your work, write a proper research paper with an abstract, with methodology, findings, experiment, conclusion, cite all the appropriate references. So that is very important if you want to, if you are serious about your work. So just a white paper is not enough. I think it's important to think of your own beliefs, cognitive biases about evidence-based practice. You may not be an evidence-based practitioner, but I think it's important from the examples that we have seen that further down the line, you will get asked and you will be questioned on why are you doing this and what is the evidence for the work. And some organizations are very good at it. Some organizations are not so. So it's your own organization culture is very important. These are some examples of industry research. This is a paper on non-fungible tokens published a while back in our journal, Another Industry Research. This is at the time when probably not many people knew about non-fungible tokens. Today, everybody's talking about NFTs. And this is a while back, a project on non-fungible tokens in genomic data, looking at ERC20 tokens and so on. Another example of industry research. It's very important that whatever you are doing, you are communicating your findings in an easy to understand way to the public, to the public services, to the governments, to the policymakers, decision makers. So this is an academic researcher on our YouTube channel talking about utility of blockchain for climate mitigation. So if people don't know about your work, they are not going to cite it, they are not going to use it. So very important that you communicate your findings, whatever sources you available to you, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a YouTube channel. So once you've conducted your research, very important that you communicate it to the public. This is an article that I wrote a while back on how various blockchain research papers have been cited by policymakers and organizations around the globe. It's available on the JBBA, Creating Global Impact, written about 2 years ago. Another platform to publish and present your findings are scientific conferences. There are not many blockchain international scientific conferences, but if you find an opportunity, try and submit your abstract to the scientific conferences where your work will be assessed and reviewed again by the experts. And you will also get an opportunity to network with other academics, industry leaders. This is a slide from a conference from last year, the Blockchain International Scientific Conference that we hosted. Another industry researcher from Ireland presenting his industry research on blockchain-based project management at our scientific conference last year. Another industry researcher presenting his findings. So there is a lot of interest in the industry and enterprise sector on scientific research, and there's a lot of work that's been published already. This is a slide just to show you how presenting at just another conference is different from a scientific conference. So this is a slide showing how your work is assessed when you present your abstract or paper to a scientific conference. On the right side of your screen is the review criteria. So there are some very stringent criteria that are being used. This is the one that we use at our scientific conference, and other conferences have their own criteria. But essentially it looks like this. You should have a statement of the research question. You should clearly state your goals. What's the bigger picture? How your work is relevant to the literature and to the scientific community. Then, is the methodology appropriate and properly applied? What are the future research recommendations? What is your contribution to distributed ledger technologies? Has your work made a significant impact? And then overall your presentation, whether your presentation is systemic manner and how well you come across. And on the left side of your screen are the comments from the reviewers. So when you submit your abstract to a scientific conference, it is reviewed by independent experts. If your abstract is accepted, then you are invited to present your paper at a scientific conference where it is reviewed again on the day. And then if you submit your paper to the journal, then it gets reviewed again. So essentially, your paper is reviewed 3 times, and you get some really, really useful feedback. So here are comments from the reviewers: excellent focus, showed understanding of the field, good animation, flowed well, results well presented. So it's very, very useful. So at every step, your work is getting better. Maybe there are some blind spots that you are not aware of, and now they are highlighted. So you can improve and get better. Another important slide is called alt metrics. Now this is another impact metric on once your work is published, then who is reading about your work, who is talking about your work. And we have all this information and all this data. We have some very clever softwares and tools that we use and this is a real-time data. Who is citing your work, how many times it's been cited in the government documents, in the policy documents, who is reading your work, who is citing your work, and so on. If you are interested in learning more about how to write a proper scientific paper, there is plenty of information available at our YouTube channel. And also, if you are a part of the Center for Evidence-Based Blockchain, which is a global think tank of academia and industry thought leaders, researchers, authors. Here is one example of an academic saying, "Hi guys, I've got an interesting blockchain project. Would you be interested to collaborate?" And this is now going to the industries and the members of the Center for Evidence-Based Blockchain. And if they are interested in collaborating and participating in the project, then they join forces and then they take it from there. So there are lots of training programs, courses, workshops, projects that we do together at this Center for Evidence-Based Blockchain. So I would like to conclude my talk here. I hope I've conveyed the key messages to you. If you have any more questions, you can email me. And there is a hashtag called evidence-based blockchain. If you are on LinkedIn, follow this hashtag. There's plenty of some very useful information. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Naseem. So just looking at the chat, there's been a couple of questions. One of them was based, this is from, was it D? Based on the stats that were given earlier, what were the main excuses or reasonings behind failing to provide adequate evidence? Do you have an idea?
No, we don't have that idea because we only looked at what information was provided. And most of the time, there is really no excuse not to provide the evidence. If you are conducting a project, if you have the data, then you should be looking at presenting your findings and publishing your work. So there was no excuse provided as such.
Someone else has asked, but this may well be a question that you can't answer. Someone was asking what's the name of the blockchain used in project management research?
I can answer this question. This paper has been published in the JBBA. If you go to JBBA, the Journal of the British Blockchain Association, and search blockchain project management in the search bar, this full paper has been published in the journal. So it was not just an abstract presentation, but actually full paper has been published after peer review.
So people can go there to find out more about it.
Yeah.
Then someone else, is there anything that you've seen about an evidence-based example which helps in blockchain and mining? So I presume that's the mining industry rather than Bitcoin mining and crypto mining.
Yeah, what I would recommend is that you go to directory of open. So I have not, I can't think of the top of my head now, but if you are interested in a peer-reviewed research, then a very useful platform is directory of open access journals. So first search the JBBA. If you can't find any article that relevant to your question there, then go to directory of open access journals, DOAJ. DOAJ only lists and index journals that are of high quality. So JBBA is indexed there, and there are many other journals. And all the journals have to be peer reviewed. They have to have an editorial board. There is a very strict, stringent process that you have to go through for your journal to be indexed in the directory of open access journals. So for for questions such as this, I would recommend that you go to Directory of Open Access Journals and see if you find an article that is relevant to your question.
Okay, thank you. And so someone, Robert's asked, he's mentioned about Ethos, which has a social impact project running over the last 11 years, which they'd like to develop as a blockchain project. What's the best way to find collaborators for the research and to participate in evidence gathering? Because it's not quite the same skill set as what a blockchain delivery company does.
I suggest best to email us, and we will look into it if we have got any of our members or partners who are working on similar projects.
Cool. If you could put the email in the chat, just for that'd be very helpful.
Yeah.
Are there academic? This is from Christy. Are there other academic journals that you recommend for blockchain research?
Yeah, go to Directory of Open Access Journals and type blockchain, and you will get a list of the relevant journals there. Dave, have you seen any robust applications of NFTs? Evidence-based research? No, not yet. The paper that we published in the JBBA is on genomic data, on an ERC20 tokens, or is healthcare research. I've not come across any others, but I'm sure there will be. I think the interest is picking up. So I'm hoping that there'll be more peer-reviewed research on non-fungible tokens.
It's Rob here. Thank you for the presentation, which was really timely and informative for my organization. Really perfect. What I was coming to in the PhD question was actually having this as a project for a piece of research, which would, it's a big subject, social impact. And Ethos have been running this experiment into how do we have narrative rather than economic monetization of social impact. And we've got a lot of data that we have gathered, but it doesn't benefit for the rigor that you've just presented in your sort of scientific approach to doing this, which I think would be a fantastic subject for a PhD paper, which is kind of looking at the blockchain, the research, for us to sponsor a PhD student in bringing all of that evidence together over the next year or so.
Yeah,
I just wonder whether other people have taken that approach.
Yeah, fantastic idea. I agree. I think we need more research now, because we have got blockchain around for good more than a decade or so, and we have got projects, we have got some results, we've got some data, and I think it's time to look at the social impact, societal impact. Excellent. Absolutely. I would support this. And if you drop me an email, I'll try and help you connect with the university folks who would be very happy to look into this.
Okay, great. If everyone could give Naseem a virtual round of applause. It was a fantastic presentation, and it really does highlight the importance of ensuring that people take the learnings that you get from scientific rigor seriously when it comes to actually developing new products and services with something as innovative as blockchain.